unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we're going to take up tab 2, public testimony on the Early Steps program. So first we're going to take public testimony, and then I'll make an opening statement about this bill. Teresa Bulger, Florida Coalition of Spoken Language Options. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. And I would like to thank the Senate for permitting me to speak, and also thank the Senate for Early Steps. Early Steps is a wonderful, wonderful program. I could not find a family, and any of the families I'm privileged to serve throughout Florida, that doesn't have accolades for Early Steps. Last year, I recall that the Senate had some concerns and some issues that you brought up about Early Steps, and at that point we began to monitor kind of what was going on with Early Steps. I asked our family groups to be very careful and record any incidents that happened with families with any difficulties in service provision, etc. So I can only speak for our families, but I can tell you that I have not found a single case of a family that's had difficulties with Early Steps since the Senate intervened last winter. So I am here to thank you, and thank you for Early Steps, and to tell you, at least for families of children who are deaf learning to listen and talk, it seems to be working. Thank you for that fix, and I want to thank you.
Thank you very much for being so thankful. I think so. I think that what we're talking about is the funding that really helped the situation. Okay. All right. Next is Danielle Austin, parent of an Early Step child. Danielle Austin, welcome.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Because if you answered yes to that question, then you can do more than my son was capable of doing when he was born. After failing 3 newborn hearing screens at birth, at just 4 weeks old, our son Abbott was diagnosed with bilateral profound hearing loss. Even with the most powerful hearing aids money can buy, he didn't respond to noises at 110 decibels, which is the equivalent of standing next to a jet engine running. He couldn't hear that or anything else. With no history of hearing loss in our families, we were shocked. My husband and I were shocked. We had little knowledge of what we should do. And that's when Children's Home Society and the Early Steps program came into our lives. Shortly after Abbott's diagnosis, we were put in touch with our case coordinator at CHS. They came to our homes. They met with us about the services the Early Steps could provide with our son. They reviewed our options with us. Early Steps immediately set up therapy. At just 6 weeks old, our son, who couldn't even hear yet, had his first auditory verbal therapy appointment. The therapist came to our home weekly so that we weren't inconvenienced running all over town trying to go to therapy appointments because it allowed us to still work full time. CHS was instrumental in coordinating those services, making sure that we had somebody working with our son that had the skill set that a child with his disability needed. At 5 months and 1 week old, Abbott became, and is still to this day, the youngest child in Florida to receive a cochlear implant. His left ear was turned on, and he heard for the first time on December 8, 2010. He received a second cochlear implant at 11 months old. When he was just 8 months old, the therapist we were using left the Tallahassee area. Because working with deaf children with cochlear implants is such a specialized area, we ended up choosing a therapist in Gainesville. CHS did not have a contract with the provider that we chose, but our service coordinator and other people at CHS worked tirelessly to get a contract set up with Shan so that Abbott could receive the services he had already been receiving, and they could continue seamlessly. For 1.5 years, my husband and I drove to Shan's once a week for 1 hour of therapy. CHS, they took care of all of the bills for Abbott's therapy, and they alleviated that burden for my husband and I because we're considered middle class and therefore didn't qualify for a lot of services that perhaps someone with lower income qualify with, but having a child born deaf, and all the extra medical bills really created a financial burden for our family. When Abbott entered a public preschool, in order to hear optimal levels, he needed an FM system, and once again, CHS and Early Steps provided this piece of equipment. He continued to receive services from from Early Steps until he graduated at 3 years old. They had the most adorable little graduation ceremony, and all the kids are wearing their little yellow caps and gowns, and parents are just beaming with pride over all the accomplishments that all these children have made in 3 years. When Abbott aged out of Early Steps, our case coordinator made sure we had all the resources we needed to have a smooth transition into big boy school. Our son is a testament of what early intervention and having appropriate services and equipment can do for a child's life. He discharged from all therapies at age 4. Currently, he is testing above what is considered age appropriate in speech and language, even for a hearing child. If you didn't know he was deaf, you would have no idea. He even inherited my accent. In August of 2015, he entered a mainstream kindergarten class. His only accommodation is an FM system. Not only is he doing well, he is thriving. He just received his first report card and was given the highest marks possible for a kindergartner. Oh, wow. He's a social butterfly, loves to learn, and is admired by his teachers and classmates. Early Steps and CHS played an important role in Abbott's success. They not only provided the services for him, but they provided support for our family as well. I knew that if I got stuck or needed resources, that my case coordinator was only a phone call or an email away. Thanks to Early Steps and the work of CHS and their employees, kids like my Abbott are getting the services they need from qualified professionals, and parents don't feel like they're in this fight alone. They helped my husband and I turn a baby that couldn't hear into a 5-year-old that never stops talking. And our family is forever grateful for the work they do. Thank you for allowing us to present to you today.
Thank you for sharing that very heartwarming story with us. So you're in support of this bill, and
Yes, thank you.
Do you think there are any changes that need to be made to Early Steps? That's what we're doing.
I think there's always improvement in anything, and I would be happy. I have good relationships with a lot of people at CHS, and I constantly call them and discuss, various processes that could be improved within the system, and I have a pretty good relationship.
How did you learn about Early Steps?
Well, when our child failed the newborn hearing screen, I believe how the process works is it automatically, CMS automatically referred over to Early Steps, and then when the audiologist gave us the diagnosis, she said, by the way, your son can't hear, here's a book, call me in a week. They had to send a referral over.
So the newborn early screening test was given in the hospital?
Yes, ma'am, 3 times, and all 3 times they said, don't worry about it, he probably just has a lot of fluid in his ears, it happens all the time. And we showed up a month later and had his ABR, and she spent 2 hours sending thousands of noises straight to his brain, and he didn't respond to a single one.
Many, many years ago, when I was in the Florida House, 8 years ago, I was one of the authors of the newborn hearing screening panel that expanded it to pick up genetic and enzymatic disorders. So I'm very familiar with it, and I'm glad to see that it's
We're
being
very
utilized.
thankful. I have a 15-year-old, and I don't even remember, when she was born, I don't even remember them saying anything about a newborn hearing screen. And I know when Abbott was born and he went to the nursery, and my husband followed him, and he came back and said, everything's okay. And like 2 hours later, he said, oh, by the way, they said something about a hearing test he didn't pass, but they're going to do it again before we leave. And, I went into mommy overdrive, and the rest is history, but we've done really well. He's adorable. He talks nonstop.
Great story.
Yeah, so
Thanks for
thank
sharing
you.
with us.
Madam Chairman, that is a great story, and I do remember that 8 years ago. We're in the house together. It's so wonderful to see
It's
our work
happening.
pays off. That's fantastic, and how it helps people. Thank you for that testimony. Really great, and I'm glad he got your accent. It's great.
Cindy, Cindy Loomis, parent of early stepchild. Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm in support of this bill. I'm on the board of the North Central Board for Children's Home Society. We are in support of this bill with some changes that I know Summer Pfeiffer will be working with you on. I also want to share with you my own personal story. 20 years ago, my son was born here in Tallahassee at TMH. He was 2 pounds 10 ounces. 4 days into it, he had a grade 4 intracranial bleed, which is like a stroke for a child. We took our child home, our son John home, after 12 weeks. He was on a heart monitor. He had hydrocephalus from the great brain bleed. We didn't know if he'd be blind. CHS was put in touch with us through the hospital, easy as can be, and I was assigned a caseworker that came into my home, helped us with physical therapy, speech therapy, massage therapy. Now, 20 years later, my son's a sophomore at the University of Florida in computer engineering. And I will tell you, I know without a doubt, my son would not be where he is today without that early intervention from 0 to 3. If you don't give these kids services at that age period, you lose them to who knows where, correctional institutions, more severe issues than they could potentially have. But the massage therapy, the speech therapy, the caseworker telling me I needed to take my son to Shands to get a shunt, those are things that if you don't do those from 0 to 3, you will lose these children. I'm a success story. Please continue to support Early Steps, work with Children's Home Society to make the modifications to streamline the program, and get appropriate funding, and make sure the funding's used where it needs to be. Any questions?
Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Bell.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Doug Bell, for the record, here on behalf of the Florida chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I want to thank you, and particularly thank Senator Garcia and President Gardner for the increase in funding last year. With regard to the bill, we support the bill, but I also want to thank the Developmental Disabilities Council as well as the Children's Trust and other stakeholders for working with you, Madam Chair, and with your staff on some changes going forward. I think there's some more work to be done, but we think that there's been a lot of progress so far, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mimi Graham, Director of Florida's FSU Center Prevention Early Intervention. Welcome.
Thank you so much. We applaud the bill, although there's still some issues to work out, particularly expanding the eligibility so it can truly be early intervention, not late intervention. I don't know if you all were around in 1986, but the Florida legislature passed the Handicap Prevention Act. It was called Chapter 411. And back then, we identified what were the issues that were likely to cause handicapping conditions. You remember? And yet it was never really funded. We could have a totally different state had we really funded the conditions that lead to handicapping conditions. And so we got mounds of research that show the benefit of early intervention, and yet we miss about 80% of kids with the autism spectrum, even though that we're able to identify it reliably by 16 months of age, and those kids can then be in a regular classroom. If identified later, the average cost is up to $2.4 million per child. And so we know what to do, and yet in 2010, the state restricted the eligibility of Early Steps, that only the most severe kids, you had to be 2 standard deviations below the mean, which is only 2% of kids. So only the most severe kids could then qualify, instead of the kids that we know with just a little bit of intervention could be in normal classrooms. So we applaud this bill in expanding the eligibility. We'd like to see it even expanded more, because what we do early costs the least and has the most bang for the buck. We do have questions about the individual family support plan as the authorizing document. I was part of the FSU research team that we spent 5 years when Part C came to Florida. We did the research and spent time planning. We spent years perfecting the IFSP and it is now being used as an authorizing document in Broward County with Sunshine Health, and they are very happy with the IFSP as the authorizing document for Medicaid. And then also, the federal audit found that Early Steps was out of compliance with social emotional screening and outcomes. It's a really easy fix. All you have to do is screen for social emotional issues and then provide the appropriate intervention. So we would really like to see that that's emphasized. Lots of kids coming out of the NICU have trauma. We're supposed to be serving kids from child welfare who have lots of delays, and we're really not properly identifying them. And then lastly, the funding must really match the service delivery model. This is a model that's provided in the natural environment, meaning either the home or the child care center, and we have now restricted that you can't pay for a person's time to go to the home, so we can't have a model that is in the home and yet we don't pay people's time to go to the home. So we know that this needs to be worked out. So I thank you so much for your commitment to early intervention, and we know that it makes a huge difference, and it's in the best interest not only of the children but of the state. Thank you.
Thank you, especially for your commitment to early childhood. Jessica Scheer. Yeah, she's with United Way of Miami-Dade. Thank you very much, Jessica. Deborah Dowd, Prenatal Services, Early Childhood, the Florida Developmental Disabilities Council. Welcome.
Thank you. I would like to express the strong support of the Florida Developmental Disabilities Council for this Early Step bill. The council considers the Early Steps program vital to minimizing disabling conditions and optimizing the development and potential of Florida's children. I would like to thank the committee for this bill because it reflects the commitment to early intervention, and it conveys that Early Steps is an important component of this state's early childhood programs and future of children. I would like to thank the committee staff for listening to the Early Steps stakeholders about what the program is, our issues and ideas. In particular, this bill conveys that the intent of Early Steps is to support the building of the capacity of the families to optimize their child's development. It's not just a therapies program. The bill lays the groundwork for building strong partnerships with providers, families, and advocates in many aspects of the program. And it recognizes the importance of continuing to examine how we can better meet the early intervention needs of the state with the annual Early Steps plan. This bill also provides an opportunity to address key operational issues that will improve the reach and effectiveness of the program. We would like to continue to work with the committee on these issues, including the need for a payment structure that supports early step services in the natural environment and more timely provider enrollment. These issues are keeping the local Early Steps program from securing the providers that they need. We'd also like to continue to work on the elimination of splitting of the 85% for direct services into subcategories for service coordination and other direct services. We'd like to work on the expansion of eligibility to serve more children who could benefit from these early intervention services. Also, a different solution to the Part C dollars being used to pay for services that are Medicaid or that could be covered by private insurance, instead of the local Early Steps programs developing local agreements with the Medicaid managed care and the private insurance. And finally, work on adequate staffing at the state office to support the local Early Steps program. Thank you again for your commitment to the Early Steps program.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to working with you. Barbara Stalos from representing Easter Seals.
We're in support of the bill.
Thank you. Ted Granger, United Way of Florida.
Madam Chair, ditto the comments of the two speakers. We wait in support.
Thank you. Diana Ragby. Diana,
I'm in support from the Children's Trust and support the more extensive comments from Dr. Graham and Dr. Dowd. Thank you.
Diane, you wanted to also speak on adoption. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure what happened to my card.
You could come on up. You can speak on both bills.
I'm in support of both fine bills.
Okay, really apologize. It got lost in the shuffle, but I did see your name and somewhere. I'm sorry. So basically, most of you are in support. There are some issues that need to be addressed. So this Early Steps bill, I believe, is a step in the right direction, and I want to thank Claude and Barbara and Carol and everybody who's worked on this. So what does this bill actually do? The current statutes, first of all, are outdated and do not contain specific direction to the Early Steps program. So this committee bill updates the Early Steps statutes. The requirement for the Department of Health to have a clearinghouse of information for parents of children with developmental delays is revised. Whenever feasible, the clearinghouse will use the term unique abilities to describe children with developmental disabilities. So the clearinghouse will reach out more to parents and use the term unique abilities as often as possible. There are new goals that are established in the Early Steps program. It will provide services to mitigate the impact of developmental delays, educate parents and service providers on the importance of the first 3 years for the development of the brain. We all know how important that is. Include the family in the provision of services. This is a family-focused building capacity, as somebody said, for our families. I think that was a good way of phrasing it. Provide comprehensive early intervention services. Evaluate these services to determine their effectiveness. That's an important component, to make sure that what we're doing is the best for these children, and enhance the competencies of service providers. The bill sets performance standards for the program. The bill requires a state plan for the Early Steps program. It also requires the Department of Health to work with hospitals, establish qualifications for service providers, establish procedures for eligibility, provide an appeal procedure for parents who are denied services, and provides technical assistance to the local Early Step programs. It provides for duties for the local Early Step programs are specified. The program must coordinate with Medicaid and private insurance providers to serve children with delays. This will ensure that the funding for the Early Steps program serves as many children and families as possible. I know that Medicaid is supposed to pay first, and then the state pays from general revenue. The bill requires a report to the governor and legislature each year on the program. The bill requires the local school districts to work with the program to ensure a successful transition for children to the education system. Now, what's the difference between the proposed committee bill and the Strykel amendment? So, what have we revised from last time we were here? Terminology is revised specifically to include infant and toddlers, is used rather than child or children. Individualized family support plan is used rather than individual family support. More general terms are used to describe early intervention programs other than Early Steps that DOH must promote. Medical devices is changed to assistive technology devices. Requirement for Early Steps to assist families with financial planning and bereavement counsel are deleted. Responsibility to apply for Part C federal grant is clarified to be only DOH, not jointly with DOH. Requirement that the IFSP be completed is shortened to 45 days from referral rather than 40 days from enrollment. Accountability report deadlines is changed from October 1st to December 1st to better reflect data collection systems and timeframes, and transition to education planning timeframes changed to 90 days before the child turns 3 to match federal requirements. And the previous proposed committee bill had 6 months prior. So are there any questions about that? Well, thank you, everybody who worked very hard and who worked with the community. I believe we have a very comprehensive bill, and all our little infants who are born with disabilities will now be be getting the attention that they need. So I'm going to pass the gavel to Senator Altman at this point.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and you've done an excellent job of explaining barcode, the strike-all barcode 448330, and there are no questions on that particular, I think you asked for questions, no questions on that barcode strike-all amendment. Is there any debate on the amendment? Seeing no debate, Senator Sobel, you're recognized to close on your amendment.
Well, thank you for supporting this very good bill. I'm a firm believer, and I know a lot of people sitting out here believe that the earlier you reach a child who has problems and issues, the greater the chance that child will have greater opportunities and successes. And this is the bill that does it. We know that we heard about autism. There are so many diseases that can be combated in their infancy if you adjust them early on. So I believe this committee has a great bill that will help future generations of Florida and these kids will be great Floridians in every possible way and succeed and do what they want to do in their lives because we've helped them to make it happen. So please support this bill. Thank you.
Okay, having closed, I'd like to call the question. All those in favor of the amendment say yay. Yay. And all opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. The amendment is adopted. Also, Senator Sobel moves that SPB 7034 as amended to be substituted as a committee bill. And seeing no objection, that passes. Nikki, please call the roll on Senate Proposed Bill 7034 as amended.
Senator Dean, Senator Dietert, Senator Garcia,
Yes.
Senator Hudson,
Yes.
Senator Ring, Senator Sobel,
Yes.
Chair Altman.
Yes. And by your vote, Senate Proposed Bill 7034 is favorably reported as a committee bill. I'd like to turn the chair back to Chair Sobel.
Thank you very much. Well done. Is there any other business before the committee? Seeing none, Senator Altman moves you rise.
Great.
Thank you.